The rain hammered against the windows of the Victorian house, a relentless rhythm Elena could no longer ignore. 12 years. 12 years since Gabriel vanished on his way home from school, and she still woke every morning expecting to hear the thud of his backpack hitting the kitchen floor, the sound of his wet sneakers on the welcome mat, his voice shouting, "Mom, I'm home!" But there was only silence. Always silence. She traced a finger across the cold surface of the fireplace mantel, where the ashes lay undisturbed for weeks. The winter in Havenwood was particularly brutal that year, and Elena felt each gust of wind like an icy dagger in her chest. At 42, her face had lost the softness Gabriel used to caress as a child. Deep lines etched the corners of her eyes, and streaks of gray threaded through her brown hair, which she no longer bothered to conceal. The house felt larger, emptier with each passing day. The detectives had stopped calling 5 years ago. The neighbors no longer asked questions. The world had moved on, but Elena remained frozen in that October day when Gabriel left for his violin lesson and never returned. 16 years old he would be now, maybe as tall as his father, with that crooked smile that always melted her heart. Elena was rearranging the cushions on the sofa when she heard it, a low creak from inside the fireplace wall. She froze, her heart leaping. The house was old. It always made strange noises, but this sound was different, metallic, deliberate. She approached the fireplace and knelt, running her hands over the cold stone. The creak came again, louder this time. Elena began pressing different parts of the structure until she felt something give way beneath her fingers. A loose stone shifted, revealing a small opening. Her hands trembled as she found a hidden lever. With a dull click, a section of the fireplace base slid open, revealing a built-in safe she never knew existed. The dark metal was coated in dust, but it looked solid, untouched. A wave of nausea washed over Elena. How many years had it been there? Since when? She tried to open it, but it was locked. A small digital panel blinked with 4 blank digits. Elena took a deep breath, her hands sweating despite the chill. She started with Gabriel's birth date, 0304. Nothing. She tried the date of his disappearance, 1026. The panel emitted a low, negative beep. Tears streamed down her face as she typed the last combination that came to mind, 1012. The day they moved into that house, when Gabriel was only 4. The safe clicked open. Inside were 3 items that shattered Elena's world. A photograph of Gabriel she'd never seen, showing him smiling next to a gray-haired man she didn't recognize. A yellowed envelope addressed to her in a handwriting she knew all too well, and a small gold key attached to a leather cord. The photograph trembled in her hands. Gabriel was older in the picture, maybe 14 or 15. He wore a shirt she'd never bought, and his smile seemed forced, as if someone had made him pose. The man beside him had a hand on his shoulder, and there was something in his eyes that made Elena feel sick to her stomach. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. The letter was written in the unmistakable script of Michael, her ex-husband, the man who had abandoned her and Gabriel when the boy was only 7, claiming he couldn't handle the pressure of fatherhood anymore. Elena, if you're reading this, it means you finally found the safe. I always knew you would, sooner or later. You were always too determined for your own good. Gabriel is alive. He always has been. But it's not what you think. It's not what any of us thought. When I took him that day, I thought I was saving him, saving us both. But I was wrong. So wrong. The key opens an apartment at 247 Chestnut Street, apartment 3B. Go there, but go alone. And Elena, Prepare yourself for what you'll find. I'm so sorry for everything, Michael. Elena read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. Michael had taken Gabriel. It hadn't been a stranger abduction. It hadn't been an accident. It had been his own father. Rage and relief warred in her chest so intensely she could barely breathe. Gabriel was alive. After 12 years of nightmares, of imagining the worst, of blaming herself for not picking him up that day, she finally had an answer. But why had Michael done it? And why now? Elena tucked the photo and the key into her pocket and ran from the house, not even bothering to grab a coat. The rain soaked her instantly, but she didn't care. She drove through the rain-slicked streets of Havenwood, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Chestnut Street was on the other side of town, in a neighborhood she rarely visited. 247 was an old red brick building, with a rusty fire escape climbing up its side. Elena climbed the steps to the 3rd floor, each footfall echoing in the empty hallway. The key slid perfectly into the lock of apartment 3B. The door opened to reveal a small, dark space. Elena fumbled for the light switch. When the lights came on, she had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. The apartment was a shrine to Gabriel. Pictures of him at every age covered the walls, pictures Elena had never seen, moments she hadn't witnessed. Gabriel at 8 in a park she didn't recognize. Gabriel at 10 blowing out birthday candles. Gabriel at 12 playing basketball. Gabriel at 14. Gabriel at 15. In the center of the room sat a table laden with dozens of letters addressed to her, all postmarked, but none ever received. Elena opened one with trembling hands. "Mom, I miss you every day. Dad says you don't want to see me, that you've moved on, but I don't believe him. Elena felt the world spin. "That's a lie. I searched for him every day. You had a breakdown when he was 7, Michael interrupted. You tried to kill yourself, Elena, 3 times. I couldn't let Gabriel see you like that. I couldn't let him think it was his fault." Memories flooded back in fragments. The medication, the doctors, the weeks she couldn't get out of bed. Michael trying to explain to Gabriel why Mommy was sick. Gabriel asking if she was going to die. "So you kidnapped him?" Elena whispered. "I protected him," Michael exploded. "I did what any father would do. You were sick, Elena. You weren't well." "I got better. I went to therapy. I took my medication. After 5 years," Michael shouted back. 5 years, Elena. Gabriel was just a child. He couldn't wait 5 years to have a mother." Silence settled between them, heavy with pain and regret. Elena looked around the apartment again, seeing it with new eyes. It wasn't just a shrine to Gabriel, it was a shrine to Michael's guilt. "Does he know?" Elena asked softly. "Does he know I'm better?" "He knows you looked for him," Michael admitted. "But he also knows you were sick. He's scared, Elena. Scared you'll fall apart again if he comes back. I need to talk to him. He doesn't want. I need to talk to him," Elena yelled. "He's my son. You can't stop me." Michael stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "He works at the docks, repairs boats. He looks a lot like you." Elena didn't wait to hear more. She rushed out of the apartment, leaving Michael alone with his letters and his photographs and his guilt. The Havenwood docks were shrouded in fog when Elena arrived. The smell of salt and fish mixed with diesel filled her nostrils. She walked among the docked boats, searching for any sign of Gabriel. Her sneakers made wet slapping sounds against the planks of the pier. She found him on a small fishing boat, welding something on the engine. He was facing away, but Elena recognized him instantly by the way his shoulders hunched when he concentrated, exactly as he had done as a child, drawing at the kitchen table.
"Gabriel," she called softly. He stopped welding and slowly turned. Elena couldn't breathe. Michael was right. He looked a lot like her. The same brown eyes, the same jawline, but he was tall and strong, his hands calloused from work. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Elena could see the battle raging on his face. Recognition, hurt, anger, longing, all swirling together in an expression that broke her heart. "You shouldn't be here," Gabriel said finally, his voice deeper than Elena remembered. "I looked for you every day," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "I know," Gabriel replied calmly. "Dad told me." "Then why?" "Because I don't want you looking for me anymore," he interrupted. "I've built a life here. I have friends, I have a job, I have a girlfriend. I don't need you." The words were like daggers to Elena's chest. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never like this. Never with Gabriel rejecting her. "You were my world," Elena whispered. "When you disappeared, I died. I died and spent 12 years trying to resurrect myself." "You were dead long before I left," Gabriel said, and there was venom in his voice. "I remember, Mom. I remember you lying in bed for days, not talking to me. I remember you crying in the bathroom. I remember finding you that day, with the pills scattered on the floor." Elena closed her eyes, the memory flooding back. Gabriel was only 7 when he'd tried to swallow an entire bottle of antidepressants. He'd been the one to find her, the one to call 911, his child's voice trembling. "I was sick," Elena said. "I didn't know how to ask for help." "You didn't have to ask," Gabriel replied, his voice cracking slightly. "You just needed to love me more than you loved your pain." The silence between them was broken only by the sound of waves lapping against the pier. Elena felt as if she were drowning, as if the air had become too thick to breathe. "I always loved you," she said finally. "Even when I was sick, even when I couldn't show it, I always loved you." "Not enough," responded he, returning to his work. "Not enough to stay alive for me." Elena wanted to argue, to explain about depression, about how mental illness isn't a choice, about how love isn't always enough to heal the pain. But she saw in Gabriel's rigid posture that he wasn't ready to hear it. Maybe he never would be. Can I see you again?" she asked. Gabriel stopped working again, but didn't turn around. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe, someday, but not now." Elena nodded, knowing she couldn't force anything. She'd lost the right to force anything a long time ago. "I'll be here," she said, "in Havenwood, in the same house, if you ever want to try again." Gabriel didn't respond, but Elena saw his shoulders tense. She turned to leave, but stopped when she heard his voice. "Mom?" Elena wheeled around, her heart leaping with hope. "Are you better? Really?" Gabriel asked, still not turning. "Yes," Elena replied, and it was the first time in 12 years she'd said it and truly believed it. Gabriel nodded slowly. "Okay." Elena waited for something more, but he returned to his work. She walked back down the pier, her heart heavy but no longer shattered. There was something in Gabriel's "okay" that gave her hope. Not for today, maybe not for tomorrow, but for someday. When Elena got home, she found Michael sitting on the porch, drenched in the rain. He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes, as if he'd been crying. "You talked to him," Michael said. It wasn't a question. "I did," replied Elena, climbing the steps to join him under the small overhang of the porch. "How is he?" "Hurt," Elena said honestly, "but alive, healthy. He has a life." Michael nodded. "He's a good boy. Man, he's a good man." "You raised him well," Elena admitted, though the words were hard to say. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. Elena thought of all the things she wanted to say to Michael, How much she hated him, how much she understood him, how much he'd destroyed her life, how much he'd saved
Michael had been a victim of an impossible situation where any choice he made would hurt someone. "Will he come back?" Michael asked. "I don't know," Elena replied, "but I'll be here if he decides to try." "Are you sure you can handle that? If he comes back and then changes his mind? If he decides he can't forgive you?" Elena looked at the house where she'd spent 12 years living like a ghost, then looked at the man who had destroyed and saved her family at the same time. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I have to try. I owe it to him. I owe it to myself." Michael nodded. "You want me to leave? Get out of town? Leave you two alone?" Elena considered the question. Part of her wanted him gone, to disappear forever as some kind of poetic justice. But part of her, the part that had learned that life rarely offers poetic justice, knew that Gabriel might need his father too. "Stay," she said, "at least until we know if he's going to try." Michael looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "No," Elena admitted, "but I'm sure Gabriel deserves to have both his parents available when he's ready." The rain began to lessen, and Elena could see the first stars appearing between the clouds. She thought of Gabriel, working on his boat, building a life that didn't include her. She thought of all the birthdays she'd missed, all the graduations, all the first dates and first jobs and first loves. But she also thought of the "okay" in his voice when she said she was better. She thought of the way he'd stopped working to ask. She thought of the fact that he hadn't simply walked away when he saw her. Elena knew that maybe Gabriel would never completely forgive her. Maybe he'd never be able to forget the 7-year-old child who found his mother trying to die. Maybe he'd never be able to trust her again. But maybe was more hope than Elena had felt in 12 years. She stood and reached out to Michael. "Let's go inside," she said. "Let's make some coffee and figure out how to fix what we broke." Michael looked at his hand for a moment, then picked it up. "We might not be able to fix this," he said. "We might not," Elena agreed. "But we can try." They went inside together, leaving the door open in case Gabriel decided he was ready to try too. Elena knew he might never show up. She knew she might spend the rest of her life waiting for a forgiveness that would never come. But she also knew she had survived 12 years of not knowing if Gabriel was alive or dead. She could survive a lifetime of knowing he was alive but distant. It was a different kind of pain, sharper but also cleaner. And for the first time in 12 years, Elena didn't have nightmares that night. She dreamt of Gabriel as a child, running through the halls of the house, laughing. When she woke up, the sun was shining, and she could hear Michael making coffee in the kitchen. She slowly descended the stairs, savoring each step. When she reached the kitchen, she found Michael standing by the window looking out at the garden. "There's someone out there," he said quietly. Elena joined him at the window. Gabriel was standing in the garden, his hands in his pockets, looking at the house. He seemed hesitant, as if he was deciding whether to knock on the door or simply walk away. "Are you going to let him in?" Michael asked. Elena looked at the son she had lost and found and lost again. She looked at the man he had become without her. She looked at the decision he was clearly struggling to make. "I'll leave the door open," she said, "and I'll wait to see what he decides." And so Elena opened the front door and sat on the porch, a cup of coffee in her hands and 12 years of hope in her heart. Gabriel saw her and hesitated, then took a step toward the house, then another. Elena didn't know if he would make it to the porch. She didn't know if they could talk without hurting each other more. She didn't know if they would ever be a family again. But she knew she was ready to find out. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin. Gabriel stopped halfway, his eyes meeting Elena's. For a moment that seemed to last an eternity, they simply looked at each other, mother and son, separated by 12 years of pain.
and a distance that seemed impossible to bridge. Then Gabriel took another step, and another. Elena remained still, hardly daring to breathe, as her son slowly walked toward the house where he had been born, where he had taken his first steps, where he had asked, "Why doesn't Mommy love me anymore?" When Gabriel finally stopped on the first step of the porch, Elena could see tears in his eyes. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't know how to forgive you. I don't know how to trust you again." "I don't either," Elena replied softly. "But I'd like to try, if you want to." Gabriel looked at her for a long moment, then sat down on the bottom step of the porch, keeping his distance but not leaving. "Okay," he said finally, "let's try." And so, under the morning sun in Havenwood, a mother and her son began the long journey back to each other. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be fast. There would be more tears, more anger, more nights when both